Good. I'll just, yeah, sometimes, yes. Um, some, uh, my daughter has to get a train at 6, so I'm usually up at 5, and because that's only Thursdays and Fridays. I mean, sometimes, I was up till quite late Saturday. I was playing a gig. Um, so yeah, sometimes my day starts at 5, and sometimes it goes on till 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning. It can be both. And it's amazing how many people say to me, right, I bet you're not a morning person. And yet, yesterday I had a 3 hour meeting at 9 o'clock till 12 o'clock with a couple whose wedding I'm doing. So, and then I was playing in the afternoon for a celebration of life. So after I saw you on Tuesday, uh, I did a concert in a care home on the Wednesday. Thursday, I played for 5 hours for a launch of the Hilton Hotel. Friday, I did a concert with my jazz trio. Saturday, I was on the organ for a wedding, and then in the afternoon for a wedding celebration. And Sunday, I was playing for 3 hours for a celebration of life. And so it's different things, different times, different people, different scenarios. Go for it. Lincoln. That's a great question. Wow. It's the um it's the thing that had a long conversation about this at the wedding on Saturday, because there were a lot of people around me who said I play music and I wanted to make it and I didn't. Apart from the ability, which I suppose you wouldn't question after seeing me on Tuesday, you have to have an awareness of the administration of, like, I've got a diary that tells me where I'm going to be. I've had in the early days, because I'm such an old git. I used to have paper diaries, and all my diaries. I'm writing a book at the moment, and I can reference everything that I'm doing because I've got diaries going back to 1980, and I've put a lot of detail because I've always had page a day diaries. So on every half an hour, there's a slot that says what I'm going to be doing, and next to all of that, I've put all that stuff. So the one thing you've got to be is good at record keeping. I was told on day one when I started working, so I was 21 and I was still a student, and I was told when I started working September 1987 that whatever you get, you put it in one column, and whatever you spend, you put in another. And then I met an accountant 4 months later, and he said, "This is really, really good, and you have to keep receipts and expenditure." And I met an accountant in Bond Street who was a top showbiz accountant, and he explained he took care of lots and lots of things, and he enabled me to buy my first house. Everyone kept saying to me, "You'll never be able to get a mortgage because you're self-employed," but because I had him behind me, and he was able to do the things that could open doors for me to get a mortgage, I was able to get a house. And because I had a house, I was able to work, teach, host, practice. Does that make sense? So as opposed to living in my mum and dad's house, which is what I did in the early days, I was actually able to own my own house, um, you know, when I was 26, and as well as driving a car. And that made such a difference to me because I had my own setup, um, you know, and having an account. There's three things that I have that people never know is one is having good financial people around you, having good business coaches who explain to you about strategy, about getting gigs, how to deal with the people you're working with about the very awkward subjects of money, because many people uncomfortable asking, can I? I'm getting £1,000. Can you pay me? I'm going to send you an invoice. Can you pay me? Because once the gig has happened and people disappear into the sunset, you can't chase a man for money because he's gone. And that happens to there's a lot of musicians that get ripped up, not just musicians, people in business who are naive. You have to understand about how things work, because you can't walk into Tesco's. When I'm done with you, we're going to go to my daughter and I are going to go to Sainsbury's, and you can't walk into Sainsbury's with a trolley full of stuff because you like it and say to them, you know what, I really, really love this salmon, but I haven't got the money to pay for it. You might, I know it's 15 quid, but can I give you 2.50? They'll say it's 15 or you have to put it back. They don't say that's okay, you can come back tomorrow. You may, if you've got a good relationship with your shopkeeper, then he might let you have stuff on credit, and that's fine. But you can't walk into Sainsbury's and buy £175 worth of groceries with 10 quid in your pocket. If you've only got 10 quid, you can only walk out with 10 quid's worth of groceries. And the business of music is exactly the same. And the other thing I was going to say is marketing. How are people going to know who you are? You can be the best pianist in your cellar or your garage or your spare bedroom, but at some point you've got to go to market and you've got to create a shop window so that people can see what you do and go, oh, I like that shop window. Let me push the door and go in and buy the product. Everyone is everyone is a shop. So I know I've expanded upon your question, but people that give you the right advice about money is very, very important, because at this moment in time, I'm dealing with the Inland Revenue and paying a tax bill, and a lot of people will work for 10 years and then suddenly the Inland Revenue will say, hang on, you've been working for 10 years, you haven't paid any tax. And we live in a world now where every footprint is monitored somewhere. Everywhere you go, Bruno, you can't walk down the street without being caught on CCTV. And more than ever before, the Inland Revenue now are able to tap into Stripe, eBay, and see what people earn. If you're, even if you've got an Instagram page, you say, I'm playing at the Flying Horse. If you're playing at the Flying Horse, you're getting 50 quid and you've done 100 of those. The Inland Revenue going to be interested in those 50 quids. You've got to pay your 15% of those 50 quids. And if for 1,000 gigs you haven't paid your 15%, that's a hell of a lot of money that you've got to suddenly find when they catch up with you. So that's why an accountant is important, to draw your attention to the fact that you need to address these things. Just like you don't get out of bed and just walk straight to college. You brush your teeth, you wash your face, you comb your hair, put a deodorant. We've got loads of online tools now that make it so much easier. I've got I'm not in my office or my music room right now, but I could turn the camera in my office, and I've got stacks and stacks of notebooks of where I've written, paid for music £22.50, bought a music stand £4.50, and all that. Now online. Um, what the accountant does, there's different levels. There's different levels. If we were having a conversation with Ed Sheeran, for instance, Ed Sheeran's got a team of people. There are things that Ed Sheeran will be doing that you won't be aware that he's doing. You can't. Ed Sheeran really is an entity. If you're a big artist, you're not a person. You're an entity. You're a brand. Imagine. I'll come back to Sainsbury's. There are people that work on tills. There are people that fill the shelves. There are people that do security. There are people that work in the coffee shop. As a as an artist, I'm a person with all the I am all these departments. I am catering, I'm wardrobe. Um, I still have to oversee all of that stuff and then give it to my accountant who manages all of those in the right way so that I benefit legally and pay the right amount of tax and claim for the right number of expenses. Some expenses are allowable, some expenses are not allowable, and there's a lot of expenses that he's trained in the financial, just like I'm trained to be a technician. He's trained in the whys and wherefores of the corridors of the finance, where to invest, not to invest. So you have to help yourself. Um, just because you have a cleaner, that doesn't mean to say you don't have to flush the toilet when you've had a poo. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of common sense, but there are different levels of there's different levels of engagement that people have. Very minimal engagement with my accountant now, but 15, 20 years ago, when I had I had a lot of things that I needed to sort out. He did a lot more work, and I paid a lot more money. Yeah, it's not a one size fits all. My first accountant, probably the best accountant I ever had. He was a showbiz accountant. He understood my industry inside out. The accountant that I work with now, Carl, or he's moved to Wales, so we've been working online. But he's an accountant for the candlestick maker, the postman, the baker. He's got all sorts of clients. So he knows my industry because he knows me, but he didn't know my industry as well as say Robert Breckman did, who was in Bond Street. There's some very subtle nuances about the entertainment industry. If you under That gives you a kind of, just like if a person is writing. I use football as an example. When a footballer does a transfer, he doesn't just do the transfer and get told how much money he's going to be paying. He'll have a lawyer who will be looking at the contract, who will be negotiating, because the lawyer will understand the legal loopholes of the conditions of the player. If the player gets ill, will he get paid? If he gets injured, will he get paid? If he's a striker and he scores 30 goals a season, will he get paid extra? Etc. etc. So you've got people who are real experts in those areas who will work for you, depending on how intense or how complicated you are. But yeah, I have there's, I probably in the course of a year interact with 20 people, all sorts of things, marketing, wardrobe, well-being, cosmetics, um, life coaching. Um, yeah, I network a lot. So in all my networking groups, I've got people who specialize in all of these things. I'm having a conversation with Steve. Steve, I do a lot of exhibitions, and Steve has a company called Exhibition Mastery. So if I'm having a stand, Steve will. I'm going to have. I've done 3 exhibitions for business. Six last 3 years. 9 exhibitions where I've just presented myself on the piano and maybe cards and leaflets and all the rest of it. We're going to have a conversation about what works best in an exhibition situation to engage a person who's passing traffic. What sort of banner stand works, what you should say on your banner stand, the QR codes, whether you should have a QR code, why you should have a QR code, where the QR code should be. Should it be at the top, at the bottom, in the middle? Should be at eye level? There's a lot of really subtle things. Um, Let me come back to Sainsbury's again. Sainsbury's have got psychologists that work out which bits are going to go in which areas, so that when you're at the till, they'll have sweets there that are going to catch your eye that you end up buying. They're not going to put those sweets when you walk in because that's not going to be in your thought process. You've bought your eggs, your milk, your flour, and you're just about to pay, and you've been seduced by that crunchy bar. And they said you can have 3 crunchies for £1. And you go, do you know what? You turn to the kids, go, Mum, Mum, can I, Mum, and Mum goes, yeah, okay. It's all about product placement and product presentation, and what's the coming back to what Steve says, the lettering, what type of lettering, what catches the eye, what can people read? There's no point me giving you 3 pages of information on a banner stand. Who is Lincoln? What's his name? How do we get hold of him? Well, when you walk into Lidl, where Lidl scores, you walk into Lidl, you can smell the bread. As soon as you walk into Lidl, that fresh bread makes your eyes water. You go, do you know what? I really need to have a croissant. Now, to start with, yeah, I cool giving all my tips away. When I started in 1987, I decorated a postcard. I had a treble clef in the top right with 2 sharps, and I had a bass clef in the bottom left. And in green lettering, I wrote piano teacher available, qualified, all ages, all standards, call this number. And I put it in 5 shops here in Dustin, where I live. And almost immediately, I had phone calls. I had phone calls asking me what I charged, phone calls asking me what I could teach. I had very, very few phone calls asking me what level of qualification I had. But the thing is, and I worked out that, and within 5 weeks, I had a postcard in every newsagent's in Northampton. I got on my bike and I travelled to every newsagent in Northampton. I think it was 32. Back in 1987, there were 32 newsagents in Northampton, and every one of them had one of my postcards in the window for 6 weeks. And then I extended. So from September to December, if you were looking for piano lessons and you bought a newspaper, you were going to see my card. And the level of engagement depended on lots and lots of things. And I actually kept a register of where the phone calls came from and how many phone calls and how many of those phone calls became converted clients. And I was able to zone in and say Kingsthorpe is not very good for students, or Dustin is better for students because I live in Dustin. But I had students come from everywhere. Um, and then after Christmas, I stopped advertising and I went to a very different level of mark. And I did all of that on my own. And then a few years later, I came across a sales book by someone called Jay Abraham. And then Jay Abraham led to Tony Robbins, who's very, very powerful, very, very powerful. And I learned so many things. And then I met all my friends in the business club. And in the networking business club are people who were able to give me objective advice about selling, marketing, what I say to clients. There was a car salesman that told me about the conversations he had, the 6 steps that he has to sell. And I thought a lot about all those things, and they all matter and they all count. There was a guy, there was a lady that talked about presenting yourself and talked about clothes and what you wear and what clothes not to wear. She presented me a book which I read, which talked about people in power, how they dress, what they wear, how they impact, how they convey authority. So yes, so when I say I've got 20 people around me, that's what the 20 people. Some of them can't play a note of music, but they can understand Lincoln Older products, and they'll say, Lincoln, you need to do this or you need to do that. So the person that comes in front of you on Tuesday that impresses you, that makes you go, I want to interview that guy because there's something about him. There's one thing, if you remember, there was 2 things. I was really quite smart, and I said I always show up. You can Google me, and there are thousands of images, and I will never be in a pair of jeans and trainers playing the piano. Um, I've never. Sorry. No, go for it. Go for the question. Go on. Yeah. people by people, people by people. I can sit down and play everything, but people actually, um, people I've found will buy you, the person. Um, People, if you're kind, if you have empathy, um, awareness, manners, there are lots of simple things that can turn on and turn off a person. You know, I do lots and lots of weddings, and weddings involve two people that are going to step into a situation that they're not prepared for. And so I never play weddings without meeting people first. So I say to them, right, this is what it is. This is how it's going to be. What do you want from this situation? Then I will deliver it. If I if I'm not, if it turns out that what they're expecting from me is not what I deliver, I'll be honest enough to say I'm not the person. I'm not the right person. And people value honesty. People value honesty and integrity. So I'd say my greatest selling point, having read, I'm not very when there's lots of weaknesses in Lincoln. I'm not very good at getting people to go on my Google business and put a review. But when I read reviews that people write, they, of course, they mention, yeah, Lincoln was brilliant and our guests enjoyed it, or the audience that came to a concert Lincoln did and we were most entertained. People are always talking most of all about personality. You know, he was really lovely with the kids. He was really loved. My mum and dad love him. My nan loves him. He spent time talking to my nan. My nan chewed his ears off about how she learned how to play. She learned how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star when she was 6. And I give people time. So people are very, very affected by the way you make them feel. It's not what you do; it's how they felt, how you made them feel. Yeah, huge. When I started working, the year I started teaching in '87. I then got offered a West End show um, as a student. I went in. What and some of these actors that I was working with were guys who were up there on television, very famous. Um, But the feedback I got when we'd finished the project and then I went back to college was not how good I was on the piano, is that how easy I was to get along with. I did what I was asked to do, um, and the whole culture and the atmosphere around everything that I did was progressive and productive for them. People want to be able to work with you. Um, and I have been employed um, comprehensively since that moment. And I went back to the Royal Academy of Music, and I realised that a lot of the guys who I thought were better than me were actually behind me, because a lot of them had no personality. A lot of them didn't realise that they needed to engage with their customers. They thought all they had to do was to play the piano and then bugger off and have a fag. Um, you've got to I think it's not that there are no absolute rules here, but especially if you're in a care home, you've got Florrie that's age 98 that used to play the piano, and she wants to tell you that you remind her of Liberace or Fats Waller or Lionel Richie or Michael Jackson. You have to let people share their stories with you, because especially in a care home situation, you don't know if those people are going to be around next week. Um, and what you do has a huge. I'm playing in a care home on Wednesday, a British Legion home in Southern, called Galano's House, and I've been going to Galano's House for over 20. I've been going to Galano's House for 26 years, and fantastic artists that go there. But the folks go, "Can we have Lincoln back?" I sit down. Before COVID, I always used to sit and have lunch with the same two residents. Isabel's blind, and Robert was the other one, is a Geordie, very, very ill. There's another guy who passed away and I did his birthday party, and his family said to me, "Do you know what? He talks about you all the time." And I'd never met. They knew who Lincoln was, and I didn't realise that over the 5 or 6 years that we were having lunch together, that it had that kind of an impact. You know, being a musician is a really special privilege, and your impact goes beyond the level of what you think it is in that evening, in that moment. They may have had a really down day, and your music has really brightened up the world, turned on the lights, given them a ray of hope. Um, it may be the thing that kickstarts their weekend, and they're in a better mood. They're better with the world. Um, and the fact that you've taken time out to talk to them when they've probably not had a meaningful conversation with anybody. Nobody's actually sat down and looked them in the eye and said, "How do you feel? How are you? You know, did you enjoy that? What was your favourite song? What's your favourite composer? What do you like? I like the Beatles. Would you like me to play a Beatles song for you?" It feels like nothing to you because it's not hard. You spent all these years learning Shostakovich and Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Bach, and you're being asked to play a Beatles song. You think, well, you know, I'm a distinction grade 8, and I've got a licentiate, and I studied at the Royal Academy of Music, and all I'm being asked to play is the Beatles. And this means everything to that person's children, that person's sister, that person's brother, because everyone can see the difference that that person's had. I had this lovely man, he came and played. I asked him to play Hey Jude, and he played it just for me. And maybe nobody's ever said, "I'll play that for you." I've seen lots of musicians, people say, "Oh, could you play that?" No, I'm not playing that. No, I haven't got time. I haven't got time to fit. That next time never comes, you know. Um, or when they're finished, they put their stand down and they walk straight out and don't talk to anybody. I see that so many times. And the audience want to tell you, they want to share their experience. We enjoyed it. This is our 77th wedding anniversary, and we came here especially, and you played the song that we first heard when we got together. They want to share that stuff. You have to give them the platform to share that stuff. That's so important. And that's why personality, I think, is a huge selling point, because people know that I'm going to give them time. I'm going to play the piano, but I'm also going to sit down, have a sandwich and a cup of tea, and I'm going to engage. And engagement is huge. But that's, you know, there'll probably become a time at the wedding, everybody wanted to hear Sweet Caroline. You know, there are iconic Angels, 500 Miles, you know, Ariana Grande at Manchester with the concert, and suddenly, you know, Don't Look Back in Anger has become an anthem as well. You know, I played at, I'm not going to mention any names, I played at a very wealthy person's Christmas party, and her partner had done this song sheet of modern Christmas songs that everybody apparently likes, but nobody could sing. Because they decided they wanted to be different and not have Away in a Manger and Jingle Bells. And I ended up playing Away in a Manger and Jingle Bells and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and everybody knew it. I played 500 Miles, I played Bohemian Rhapsody, I played Angels, I played Don't Look Back in Anger, and I played Sweet Caroline. The place was absolutely rocking. The person who, the guy who put the song sheet together had the biggest grin on his face. And he went, "You know what, Lincoln? You've read the room better than ever I could." And everyone went away saying, "Do you know what? I really enjoyed that sing song." And it's, and there, you know, I know lots and lots of musicians who will be requested to play that song in a party, and they go, "I don't play stuff like that." It might be the difference, you know, it might be the difference between someone having an amazing evening and someone having a okay evening. I'm not saying that you've got to be cheesy, because some people are very, very, you know, if you go to a concert at the festival hall and you're listening to Strauss, You're not expecting the pianist or the orchestra to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. The program is they're playing Strauss, and that's fine. Or you're going to La Traviata and you're going to hear some from La Traviata. It's all about context. Sorry. We were talking about relatability and songs that. Well, your question was what was my greatest selling point, and I think that um, personality. People love personality. People love hearing you talk about your experiences, how you come to play this tune. What your relationship is with it. They want you to reveal something of yourself. Whenever I notice that whenever anyone becomes famous, everyone wants to know who this person is. Where are they from? If Marcus Rashford scores an amazing goal for England, or if Harry Kane, they're going to send a reporter to where Harry Kane was born and talk to his first PE teacher and maybe his first girlfriend. And people want to know who you are. You can't. Being famous is a very, very tricky balancing act. So you've got to have privacy for your family, your children, but people like to be let in. You've got to let them in, but don't. The interesting thing is, there's a lot of with working with people who are famous. There's a narrative that they push that isn't true, and if you're telling lies about who you really are, I don't think that's good either. So yes, you have to be very protective of your life, and I get that, but people also don't want to be lied to. You know, if you're saying you're happily married and you're happily married, and then it suddenly comes out that you weren't happily married, that you were knocking off 64 mistresses, they don't. They ordinary people. These are the people that pay for your tickets. These are people that buy your albums. These are people that buy the merchandise. You know, they want to believe. They want to believe the story that they're being sold is true. They're wearing the hoodies. They're wearing the trainers. They've got take Manchester United. Manchester United. You're in Manchester United club shop in Manchester. You can get everything. You can get underwear. You can get bedspreads. You can get toothbrushes. The team, all those players are getting a cut of that. Manchester United, the club, is getting a cut of that. So when Jim Radcliffe came in and talked about Britain being colonialised, what he was doing was insulting all those fans around the world who were foreign. Because Manchester United has got a fan base that is global. There are people that fly in from third world countries and wealthy countries and other parts of the country to Manchester for a home game. And they've got Bruno and Fernandes on their back. They're not white, Caucasian, British that sing Jerusalem um, at church on Sunday, or we plough the fields and scatter at Harvest Festival, or there's a green hill far away at Easter. And, they've got different faiths. So you've got to be very, very careful about what you say out there in public, because what you don't want to do is insult the people that are sinking a hell of a lot of money into you and your products to give you that I drive a car and I live in a nice house, and I have a very good life which I've worked for, but I don't insult my customers. There are people of all there are people of all descriptions, all demographics that turn up and spend. On Friday I played off 40, 50 people in the back room of the Sun, all played good money and had a lovely meal. They wore nice clothes. They've come from everywhere. It's not for me to make judgments on them, because they made a decision to come and support me and spend that money. And I have to respect who they are and what they did, and the fact that they showed up for me, because they had many, many choices and they made that decision to come and see me. And when I'm playing, coming back to saying about showing up and presenting, I'm thinking about all of that stuff. There are girls that are fretting about what they're going to wear, what we're going to wear tonight, and they have their hair done, they have their nails done, and they're going to come and look lovely, and they smell lovely, and they want to say hello to Lincoln, and Lincoln gives them a bit of a kiss and says, "You look lovely," because they've done all this effort to come and watch me, and I have to acknowledge that. It's a huge response. With all these things comes responsibility, and that's why Sir Jim Radcliffe, who's a very, very successful businessman, a billionaire, was clumsy. I'm sure that there was merit, but it was a very, very clumsy choice of words, very clumsy choice of platform, because he upset a lot of people, you know. And that's a thing away from the piano that I have to think about. Where did that come from? It came from my parents. My parents were musicians. My dad said, "Be nice to people and be a good person. You don't know who's watching you. There are people that are looking up to you." When I came to speak to all of you at the college, you know, young, impressionable teenagers who are looking for a bit of inspiration, I want to be careful about the things that I say, because, you know, the kids are going to take on board what I say and act on the things that I do. So, you know, it's not good enough to f and jeff and swear and be rude, because everybody's impressionable, hugely impressionable. Yeah, yeah. It's a very what's his name that was rapping? I can't think of his name. You know, I had a bit of a go, and I remember talking to a rapper and saying, you know, there are some words, bitch and nigger and all those kind of words that people use, and sometimes I wonder, actually, could he have said it a better way? Could he have said it a different way? Because what you don't really want is for those for that level of articulation to become everyday acceptable language, because it's not nice, and insults somebody. There is a sector that feels insulted by what you said. You know, it's just music, it's entertainment. I know that you're creating a narrative based on your own experiences, but also conversely, you're entertaining, and what you want is for as many people to enjoy the message that you convey through the entertainment, through the product. You know, I know that that's a very simplistic thing to say. Um, so Thomas, yeah, I mean, so Thomas Beecham said that bellboys and milkmen should be able to whistle your tune, and if bellboys and milkmen can whistle your tune, then it's going to be memorable. um, and we like catchy choruses. I mean, you know, my friend who lives around the corner is the drummer for Rick Astley, and Rick Astley's biggest hit in the '80s when I was your age is "Never Gonna Give You Up, Never Gonna Let You Down, Never Gonna Burn Around and Hurt You." You can remember those words while you're washing up. You can remember those words when you're pushing the lawnmower. You can remember those words when you're pushing the trolley in Sainsbury's buying your apples, your carrots. You know, it's relatable. It's um, but you don't want to give, you don't want to give kids swear words, so they're shouting them at the teachers in the classroom, and that compromises everybody. No, don't swear. You'll upset the old ladies. Uh, the old folks. Yeah, I mean, if it, uh, sometimes you have to remember that, Bruno, you have an opportunity because you've got the internet. You have the opportunity to see the world as it really is in real time. Their generation lived in their street in, let's say, Dustin, and everything was around them. A lot of those people never traveled, never got an opportunity to understand and see other cultures. So sometimes people have a very parochial view of the world. They don't set out. I remember, I'm a black guy, with West Indian parents that met in Northampton and married here. And especially in the early part of my life, well, it still happens now. I'm a point of fascination as a black person, and sometimes people may say things that are ill-informed, but they're well-intentioned, and they don't realize that by saying what they've said, that they've probably used a different term to what they. And I have to remind myself that these people are particularly well-intentioned, but they're not informed about the way to say whatever they say. They just, if they had a bad experience in the war, they had a bad experience in the war. That doesn't mean to say if they're sitting next to a German, they're not going to talk to him, because there was a scene in the war where they didn't fight for one day and they all played football against each other. So there's the humanity. You have to, understand where they've come from and how they've come to be where they are, and how they've come to see the world the way they see. Some of these people didn't have EasyJet. Some of these people have never had passports. Some of these people have never. I'm going to be lucky enough to travel. My business coach is in Pennsylvania, or one of the business coaches I worked for. I met online. She's getting married next year, and I'm going to fly to Harrisburg to play her wedding. Now, some of the people in our little focus group have never, ever. Lisa has. I met Lisa in London 3 years ago, but some of the people in her group have never, ever met an English person. I was the first English person they'd ever spoken to. Um, so me meeting these people at the wedding or after the wedding or before the wedding will be the first time that we're physically meeting. And some of these people have never encountered an English person. They've never, ever not left the States, never left their town, never left their state. So there are many parts of Britain where people live in the counties. I was up in the Lake District, and I came across a chap in a shop near Lake Windermere, in Windermere, actually, the small town of Windermere. And this chap had never been south of Manchester, and he was in his 40s. Never, ever experienced London. People talk about Londoners not knowing about the north of England and not knowing anything north of Watford and thinking that Coventry is the north of England. And one lady said to my man who runs the venue up in Windermere, are the roads tarmacked up there? There's a level of ignorance that's beyond explanation. And yet, conversely, you've got a chap there who lives in Cumbria who's never been south of Manchester. So he wouldn't know what it feels like to be in the bullring of Birmingham. He wouldn't know what it's like to be overlooking the Thames or the House of Parliament or Buckingham Palace. He's only seen these places on television. Just like there's some people never been north of Carlisle. They think when you go to Glasgow, you get beaten up. And Glasgow is probably one of the safest cities I've ever been to. But the stereotypical version is that this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and there are people who are not well read. They're not as educated as yourself, and so their observations and their musings are based on a limited pool of knowledge. So when you're having those conversations, they mean well. I remember these people were very, very poor. They lived very simple lives. Some of them weren't given the opportunities. It's not that they didn't want the opportunities. The class system was very, very rigid. If you were working class, you stayed working class. You never got the opportunity to cross over to the middle classes and have what they had. I teach the piano, and there are kids that come to me and their family members go, "Oh, you're playing the piano. People like us don't play the piano." So there are still barriers that are self-imposed in the lives of certain people. And I see myself as a facilitator. Many years ago, I was up in a pub in Leeds watching the first match of the World Cup 2002, and I was standing next to a couple, and this girl said that she loved music, and I said, "I'll come and play your wedding," and she just couldn't get past the fact that I was going to travel over 120 miles to play the piano for her. She just couldn't accept it and wouldn't let me travel because she didn't think she was worth that. It wasn't a case of, well, I can't afford you. We didn't get to that point. She just couldn't understand that somebody would be prepared for her to do that for her special day. I couldn't get past that, and I felt terribly sad. And you can't change the world. I, you know, there are many things that you can change, but sometimes you have to accept something and you have to say, okay, this is the way it is. And it broke my heart. Broke my heart. When I rang them and said, what happened to come up, and they just couldn't. What would it say? Are we being out? They thought they were being arrogant by having this guy that they met in the pub watching England Sweden first match of the World Cup that was 1-1 with a Sol Campbell header. Then they equalised. Oh no, no, we couldn't do it. People like us don't do that. People like us don't. We don't eat. No, no, no. It's just like if you say to pick on an average person and say, "Have you ever been to the opera?" And, oh no, that's not for us. It's only for posh people. And yet, when you go and sit in Covent Garden, there's all sorts of people sitting around you. Yeah, go for it. Go on. I had a rule that I would take every gig that came on the phone, and I did that for 10 years. So from 21 to 30, when I took everything that came my way. I took it because people have said to me, "Oh, there won't be enough work to go around." So I thought, well, I better take everything. And then I did everything. So I did everything. I didn't have a barrier to entry, and then after 10 years, I realised. Well, I always knew what I wanted to do anyway, but I had a pretty. I realised that there were certain areas that I was happiest working in, and other areas that I was not so happy working in. I, I think more the answer more is what suits me and my personality, and people are always saying, "Don't you wish you did this?" and "Don't you wish you did that?" I've been in every area of music, and there are some areas that are they're not what they seem from the outside. There are lots of drivers. What you get paid, the value of what you get paid, how much you get paid, how you get paid, what's the conditions under which you work. I know the numbers on everything. Most people don't know the numbers. They think they know the numbers. I know what that influences my mind, my decisions. That also, what quality of life do I have? What time off do I have? What things do I want to do when I'm away from music? Because I love football, so I'm not going to play a gig. I do play a lot of weddings, but I promise you, if the wedding's not got my name on it and my team Middlesbrough or the Cobblers are playing at home, I'm thinking, if I'm sat here getting not very much money, will I resent this person? Yes, I will. I won't do the gig. I'd rather be at the football, and I've made that decision. So you make decisions based on how it suits your life. If somebody offered me the opportunity, yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I, I mean, I've played at football. I mean, one of my students got married at Old Trafford, so I went to Man United and did a wedding there. And I've been to lots and lots of race courses, and I've played at Twickenham. So there's lots of amazing places that I've been. Would I play on the pitch? Yeah, of course I play on the pitch. If the scenario was right and it was credible and yeah, a lot depends on the conditions. You will, you will, you will. No, no. Um, After I did my first gig in the West End, I got a call to do a show, and I had 3 days. I got the call on Thursday night. A pianist was leaving to do something else. They needed specifically a black pianist to play the show, and I had to learn 30 songs, about 300 pages worth of music over the weekend. I think I referenced it when I was talking to you guys on the Tuesday. So I did about 20 hours. on the Sunday. That was hard. It's only when I look back that I realised how massive that was. The fact that I did that made me realise that any challenge that comes down the track, I can handle it. The most difficult thing I've done recently in 2024 was a gentleman called Derek Henderson, who's a singer. He wanted to sing all his favourite songs and arias for his 50th birthday. So he was going to have a concert in Abington, and I did 300 hours practice in 50 days to get that music learned. The music was hard, but I decided to accept the challenge, and it was probably the hardest thing I've done in recent times. Sorry, I had. No, I can answer the question again. So I think I did about 300 hours and I practice, and so I had about 40 days to learn the music. Don't think too much about that. So some days I did 10 hours practice. Remember you said you got a text from me at 5 o'clock in the morning. So, I wasn't practicing at 5 o'clock in the morning when I texted you, but I was up. I've got two pianos, two rooms. I've got a piano over there, which is in the living room, which I sometimes put up practice so that it's not up under the bedrooms of my children. So I did 3-4 hours on that, and then later on the day I went to music room, which is under my daughter's bedroom. Did 3-4 hours on my piano, my acoustic piano, and then late at night I went back to the other piano. So getting the deal over the line is it's all about getting it over the line, getting the notes under my fingers. I can't I can't say that I nailed it in the way that I wanted to, but I got as close to it as I possibly could for Derek. Yeah, but I understand the terrain. I mean, ever since 20, yeah, ever since I was 21, I've probably played the piano at least 200 times a year. You know, I know what that feels like, and I know how to pace myself. I mean, I've had, I have had years where I've done over 300 gigs a year. The year I was married, I think I did 366. 2005, I did 366 gigs. Just before lockdown, 2019, I did 320 gigs. Um, I know, in one day I did one, two, three, four, five. In one day I did 5 weddings. Last summer I played 4 gigs on Midsummer's Day. I did a wedding at Whittleby, then I went to Delapre Abbey, then I went on stage in front of a couple of thousand people with my trio, played at the Solstice Festival, and then I went to the Toast of Midsummer Music Festival with the trio, with the quartet, and played there. That was it was a very very hot day. That was exhausting, but I know logistically what I needed to do. I was on four. I used 3 pianos, and I had already done the planning for the pianos. So grand piano Whittleby had the piano sitting at the Solstice, and I travelled with the other piano, which I used at gigs 2 and 4. And so I'd already got the PAs, the wires, the cables, the suits, the clothes, the shirts. 4 gigs, 4 shirts. If I need them, I actually stayed in the same suit for all 4. But had I needed to, I've got 2 tuxes. I've got 3 suits. I've got three pairs of evening shoes. So if I'm doing multiple gigs, I go from one pair of shoes to the other, so that I don't the clothes I wear don't look worn out and tired. Socks, after shave. I have an overnight bag permanently in the car if I have to be somewhere at speed. These are all sorts of things that I've planned. I mean, I drove up to the Lake District to see a venue so that when I get up there on the 1st of May to play for Megan and Kenny, I already know the place back to front. Lots of people turn up and, well, work it out when they get there. I've got my notes. I've met the people. They know I'm coming. So when I get there, they know who I am when I walk through the door, and I can concentrate on making the wedding happen. I've done a 450-mile round trip to do that, and other people who are watching this may say, "Good bloody hell," you know, but you didn't get paid for that. Sometimes getting the job done and making sure it's polished is a great look. And people say, "Do you know what? Whatever happens, this guy's always ready." I don't sit there and do the bean counting all the time. Sometimes it's what does it take to what does it take to win the situation? Because when people are watching you, they don't make allowances for you. If you screw up, you screw up. They don't go, well, he screwed up because, and that's the thing. So I know what it takes to play 200 gigs. I know what it takes to play 300 gigs. So, for instance, if you know, I've got double bass, I've got 4 double bassists that I work with regularly, 5 drummers that I work with regularly. I've got 2 sax players that I work with regularly. You know, and someone says to me, I can play in your trio. I look them in the eye and I think, right, can you handle this? No, you can't. There's a reason why you've never played those big gigs. You know, are you on time? Do you own a suit? Are you going to come in front of me and play with a crumpled up shirt and shoes that are cake? Do you know what I mean? There are so many reasons why some musicians will never share the stage with me, and they don't think those things are important. But for the person who's writing that check, I want him to know that the product he's paying for is top notch, because that guy may be wealthy or he may not be wealthy, but he's worked hard for that money. And I want him to get full value. I want him to see the product, hear the product, smell the product, love the product, go go away with a big smile on his face. And all those things affect, you know, the experience for the person that's watching. And so I think very, very hard about stuff like that. So, you know, in January, I'm looking at what I'm doing in November, and if there's things I need to do now to be ready for November, I will do them. So it's all intents and purposes, it's magic. Lincoln turns up in a lovely suit. He smells lovely. His hair's nice. I mean, my hair's a bit long. I'm going to the Turkish barbers to have my hair cut. You know, it's it's magic. People think it's magic. I just turn up and they say, "You're so talented. You did it just like that." I have no idea that I, you know, 300 hours practice, or, you know, 7 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. I played, there have been days where I've played 15 gigs back to back. I've just woken up, gone to the next gig, to the next gig, to the next gig, to the next gig. And my washing machine has got 8 dirty shirts in, and they're going through when I go to bed and I wake up. And as I'm in the shower, they go in the tumble dryer, and then I'll get them pressed before I even get in the car and set off. So on Monday, the Wednesday shirt, Tuesday, the suit, or the dry cleaners, all 5 suits are there at the dry cleaners at Sainsbury's on Tuesday to pick up on Thursday. So I'm ready for Friday, Sunday, Monday. You see what I mean? So the point is that there are so many things that you've got to think about that make it what it is. I went to, when I did Ben's wedding at Man United, I went round Man United and saw the whole place, with the guy that's head of the corporate events. I saw the main MUTV. I saw both the mega stores. I saw the corporate partners. Manchester United has so many corporate partners. If you eat a burger, it's a particular type of beef. If you use a watch, it's a particular type of watch. It's a car, it's a Chrysler. If it's a Coke, it's this particular Coke. And I thought, this is why Man United are grossing more money, and the team at the